So hello everybody, welcome back again to another new video. So here is the first video of our Linux course, Linux for Hackers. So basically this video is all about introduction to Linux. So in the first module of our course, we will introduce with Linux. So basically what is Linux is and why it is used and history of Linux, some kind of distributions of Linux and what basically a operating system is and what is a kernel. We're going to cover these topics in this video. So the first question is what is Linux? So whenever someone asks you about Linux, especially the question what is Linux, then you might answer Linux is an operating system. That's a general answer of every person. But uh, if we look into technically, if we go into very deep technically in this topic, then you can't say Linux is a operating system itself, as because Linux is a kernel. If you don't know what a kernel is basically, we are going to cover these things in later. So don't worry, please stick into this video. Before dive into the details of Linux and history of Linux, I want to introduce with the operating system first and kernel. Basically, what an operating system is, if you go into the technical details, then the operating system is a system software that manage all the resources of a computing device. It basically acts as an interface between your software and different parts of your computer hardware. Or you can say this operating system is kind of a user interface which basically which basically allow you to interact with system hardwares and the other components present in the computer system. I'm sure you might have heard some examples of operating system in the market, such as Ubuntu and Windows 7, and Mac OS, etc. So these are basically the operating system which basically allow you to interact with the systems of hardware and perform any kind of action which you do with your laptop or your computer. In simple word, you can say that the operating system is a user interface between your system hardware and the end user, such as you. So now, as you have understood what a operating system is, it is now easy to understand what a kernel. So basically, a kernel is the core part of an operating system, which basically act as a bridge between the software application and the hardware of the computer. The kernel manages system resources such as the CPU, memory, and device, ensuring everything work together smoothly and efficiently. It handles tasks like running programs, accessing files, and connecting to devices like printers and keyboards. So, in simple term, if I elaborate you, then the kernel is basically as act as a bridge between your operating system and your system hardware. As I already have told to you that the operating system is a user interface between you and your system hardware. And between the operating system and the system hardware, there is another layer which is called a kernel. A kernel is also a software program that is installed on your computer, but basically act as a bridge, or you can say as a layer between the operating system and systems hardware, which basically used to communicate the operating system and the system hardware directly without any interference. There are several kinds of kernel in the market, such as monolithic kernel, which is basically used in Unix, Linux, OpenVMS, etc., like operating system. And other kernels are also out there, such as microkernel, monolithic kernel, hybrid kernel. So, too many types of kernels are there. So if you look into this diagram above, then you can see that the operating system or the kernel with each other, or you can say the kernel is the lower level of the operating system, which basically present at the middle of the operating system and the system hardware. So here is another diagram which you can see here, that here in the upper part of this diagram, here is the application layer. For example, if you are using a Microsoft Word for creating a document file, then that is your application program which is running at the application layer, at the upper layer of the system. So that is it. and the below it there is operating system, and below the operating system there is a kernel, which is you can see in this image, and which is handling multiple resources such as your CPU utilization, memory utilization, and device management, etc. So I think now it is clear for you that what a operating system is, and what is basically kernel, and why it is used in operating system and in computer system basically. So now let us come to the history of Linux, and on our topic is what is Linux is. So let me back to the slide. Here you can see the Linux is a Unix clone written from scratch by Torvalds. The Linux Torvalds is the creator of Linux. You can consider here, and you can read this PPT. Linux is basically a kernel and Unix is an operating system. There are several and there are various family of Unix and Linux distribution, which we're gonna see later. But for now, you can consider Unix as a multicasting and multi-user computer operating system, which was originally developed in 1969 by a group of AT&T employee at Bell Lab. Linux and Unix strive to be a POSIX compliant. 64% of world's server run some variant of Unix or Linux. And the shocking part you might have heard or not, I don't think, but the Android phone has the Linux kernel installed on. Whatever your phone you are using right now, I don't know, but if you are using a Android device, then inside the Android device there is a Linux kernel. So now let us come to several distributions of Linux. So you might have heard about Kali Linux, which is a family of which is family from Debian family of OS. And here you can see there are several kinds of Linux distribution, which is on the screen now, which is the Red Hat operating system, Arch Linux, Fedora, and also there are several kind of. Here is the Debian and Ubuntu. And there are several kinds of Linux distributions on the market according to the usability, according to the reliability and uses and performance. Multiple users use various kinds of distribution according to their requirement, basically. So here is basically another slide which you can look at, which says that what is Linux and about the operating system details. So where we already have talked about Linux and operating system basically, here are some features of operating system such as process management, interrupts, memory management, file management, device drivers, networking, security, etc. So now you have understood all those things which we have discussed. So let us now come to some features of Linux. Why anybody use Linux? Because there is some kind of features which you have to keep an eye over. The first feature of Linux and the I think the first major feature and function of Linux, which is open source. This open source means you can download Linux on your operating system without any price or without any cost, as because Linux is free worldwide. The second most popular feature of Linux is you can say lightweight. And the Linux operating system is very lightweight as compared to other operating systems such as the Windows or Mac OS. It basically runs on low-end devices with a very low processor and with a less amount of RAM, less amount of storage capacity. The Linux operating system can run easily on any kind of device, which make Linux more popular than other operating systems. Another feature of Linux is high customization, or you can say you can customize the Linux according to your requirement and according to your user-friendly environment. You can customize Linux according to your own way as compared to any other operating system such as Windows. As because you can install any kind of software on Linux without any restriction of the operating system. Another cool feature of Linux is multi-user support. Linux support multi-user. Multiple user can run simultaneously at the same operating system at the same time, which makes Linux is popular. among developers and hackers. Among all the feature of Linux, I mostly agree with the features such as security and the CLI interface. If you compare Linux with other operating systems such as Windows, then apart from Windows, Linux has a better security and you can say a better command line interface than any other kind of operating systems available in the market. Also, Linux has various other features such as GUI support, flexibility, portability, free softwares, accessible updates, well-defined file system, and other features such as stability. So here are the some frequently asked question by people about Linux. The number one is which is the most important feature of Linux. The most important feature of Linux is an open source facility. As the source code is open, it can be modifiable and it can be made improvement, which mainly infuse all other features like customizability and flexibility. Another question which people generally frequently ask, which is why should anyone use Linux instead of using Windows over here? It is a very popular question among the geeks and developers that why somebody use Linux instead of using Windows as Windows is available everywhere in the market or in the internet. So basically, Linux provides user with a highly reliable operating system, or you can say Windows is prone to viruses and malware, while Linux has a significantly lower prevalence of these as mostly the viruses and Trojan horses and or you can say the worms are mostly designed for the Windows operating system nowadays. It is preferable to use Linux instead of Windows. Or another thing is where if one uses Windows for an extended period of time, he a decrease in performance. However, in the instance of Linux, it can be able to run at a much faster speed. So now we have discussed all the features of Linux, and on the screen now you can see which is the genome desktop environment of Linux distribution, which is the desktop environment, or you can say the GUI interface of a Linux operating system. Another thing is the KDE environment. It is also a part of Linux desktop environment. And here is the interface of a terminal, or you can say the command line interface of a Linux operating system. So now let us see a quick comparison between Linux and Windows. So basically, here you can read all the things we have discussed earlier, and but that is there is some kind of a more deeper technical segregation, or you can say the differentiation between Linux and Windows, which we're gonna see in our later videos. So let us now see a quick recap of what we have learned in this video. So in the very first beginning, we have learned what an operating system is and what is a kernel. And after that, we have learned what is Linux and what is the basically difference between Linux and Unix. Uh, After that, we have discussed the history of Linux and where it is came from. And then we have discussed some features of Linux, why we use Linux in our regular basis or in our ethical hacking journey. So all we have learned in this video was the introduction to Linux, and I have now introduced you to Linux. If you are a totally beginner, you don't know, you didn't know what a Linux is. After watching this video, I'm sure that you are now quite little much familiar with Linux operating system. Here was the first video where we have discussed all these things, part one of this course. So in the part two of this course, we will gonna learn about file system of Linux. So that's it for this video. Then take care and goodbye.